Green Bay Packers, banted about as the team that would push the Detroit Lions for title in the NFC North, obviously took that step forward. Jordan Love, from week 8 on last year, was the best quarterback in the National Football League, was absolutely tremendous. And a young team at that, as we saw ad nauseum. They are a $1.55 favorite to make the playoffs. They are plus 210 in the NFC North, 19-1 to win the Super Bowl with a win total of 9.5. Are you buying on the ascension of Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers?
Yes and no.
Yep.
I was a Love truther all last season. So when they re-signed him before he played a game, it told me the front office really believed in him. And the weapons around him are very good yet young. You got Watson, you got Dobbs, you got Reed, you got Musgrave, all first or second year players last year. Getting another year inside the offense with Jordan Love, I think, is going to be a positive. This is one of those situations where I feel like the hype train's gone a little too far, though.
Sure.
You're just expecting this Packers team to be able to take another step forward here in 2024, and I don't disagree they can. I just think it's already priced into the market that they will. And that's not a team I'm generally looking to bet when you already have a team that was hyped up toward the end of the season. It's somewhere where, I'm not saying I think this Packers team is going to struggle. I think they make the playoffs. I think they are the legitimate threat to the Lions inside the division. I think that if you're going to go with someone to knock off San Francisco or Detroit, I think the Packers make a ton of sense from that perspective. But I still have some questions around what this team is going to be able to do from a defensive standpoint, where they're remaking their defense. You've got a new DC coming in. And then from an offensive standpoint, this is a middling offensive line. And that's something that I don't think has been talked about enough. You're switching out you're switching out to your running back to Josh Jacobs, not a move that I loved either. So there are certain situations here where, I think they're going to be good. I think they're probably going to be about maybe a little better than what we saw at the last part of the season, the later part of the season. But I don't know if the jump that is being priced into them is the correct jump.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with all of that. When you're talking about, like, just at the margins, it's just a team that, you've just turned the notches just a little too far in one direction. When you're talking about the way that it's priced, both Super Bowl, future, almost everything that you look at here for this team. MVP, right. When you put them, and I think you could be the same could be said potentially for a team like Houston, but, this is a team that futures-wise is nearly on par with a team like Buffalo, not too far behind Cincinnati, and I think that's where you have some questions as to where this team is currently priced. I agree with all your sentiment, which is playoff team, has the makings of being a playoff team, and everything on paper looks really solid. Even look week 1, where you're talking about a almost literal coin flip in this spot against the Philadelphia Eagles on a neutral, a team that we know has made some improvements and has been there before, has a history of doing this, and the market's near equals with them. And it's okay, let's see what's going to happen.
Yeah,
right.
I already bet the Eagles, so I kind of disagree with it. They're equals with the Eagles on a neutral field.
Yep.
And that kind of goes into my sentiments. Again, I don't think this is a bad Packers team. I think the market believes this Packers team is going to be 20 to 30% better than what they were last year. And I just can't get behind that same sentiment. And you mentioned, they're sitting there, they're the 5th choice to win the NFC right now. That's probably correct, but the pricing is what I don't agree with. I think they should be more around that Falcons, that Rams price, and we'll get to the Bears in a second, which I think is wild at 15-1. But it just... everything has to come together perfectly for them to achieve the current pricing in the market, and that's a team that I am generally going to be against. Now, I'll be really interested in season to see what happens with the pricing on the Packers. If they do lose to the Eagles in week 1, how does this adjust? Mm-hmm. Where do we see them go? Do they come back to a number that all of a sudden I think may be too short? I think that's completely plausible, that this Packers team becomes one that you want to bet a little later in the season if they have any sort of struggles early. And then the health thing is a concern as well. They could not get those 3 wide receivers healthy at the same time at any point last year, just consistent hamstring injuries with them. Is that going to be something that changes? And we've mentioned the defense a little bit, but this is a defense that underachieved in my mind consistently the last 2 to 3 years. If they do take that step forward, I think it's on the defensive side of the ball. I think that you see the switch at DC make the big difference here for this Packers team.
Yeah, and what I'm curious about, too, for this team is when you evaluate them from a schedule standpoint. So we already mentioned week 1, neutral in Brazil against the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, I do think it opens up a little bit when you talk about, okay, and then you follow that up, extra rest, you get a home game against the Indianapolis Colts. Again, I am a Colts fan, but I do think that team can be better. A lot depends on Anthony Richardson, but they've got a lot of good pieces for them. Tennessee on the road, Minnesota at the Los Angeles Rams, and then home against the Cardinals, the Texans, before you go out to Jacksonville. I mean, this record-wise, you could be in a pretty good spot if you're Green Bay by the time you take on Detroit in Week 9 before your bye. Is this more of an opportunity where look for a pretty decent start and then in season come in to potentially play against them? We're talking about adjusted win totals, make miss playoffs, things like that.
I think it will be very interesting what happens after this Eagles game.
Yes.
Because I'm high on the Colts.
I am too.
And you have Shane Steichen, who's coaching the Colts, who
UNLV zone?
Just coached the Eagles. And so you're going to see him understand what the Eagles do from a game plan perspective and how he can then exploit that by coaching the Colts the next week. So I think that's a little trickier spot than a lot of people may think it is. I agree with you. After that, the schedule does lighten up a little bit, but that at Rams game I think is going to be a tough game. Then you've got the Texans, Jaguars, and Lions. 3 teams that all could win their division week 7, 8, and 9. That's going to be the stretch there that you've got to decide, do I believe in this Packers team or not? This is a team where I think the schedule's pretty balanced. Like one of the few teams, I've talked about this in a couple different shows, talked about it here on The Handle. I like sending myself calendar invites to say, hey, look at this team from a playoff perspective, a win total perspective, a MVP perspective, all these different in-season bets you can make after a specific week. I don't have any with this Packers team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it might be worth pointing out that game against Jacksonville at home is the first return trip back for Jacksonville after consecutive games at London, so we'll see if that does anything for them when they take them on in Week 8. And I would agree. I think what's going to be fascinating is, like you said, it's very, I think it's similar. We'll get to the Bears, but it's just a team that has expectations really loaded in and baked into what it's going to be. So then I'll ask this. What is the reality that this team does hit on all cylinders? What if this is exactly what everybody expects them to be? What if they are sitting on potentially 11 wins and pushing the Detroit Lions for the NFC North? Like, is this a team that if everything goes right for them, they can win a Super Bowl this year?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do think that they're that good. Now, I don't believe that they're properly priced to do so right now, but the ceiling for them is definitely a Super Bowl. I mean, you look back and you look at the game that they played in San Francisco in the playoffs later in the season. I think they were the better team in that game. I think that they got unlucky to lose that game, and they didn't take advantages of some opportunities early. Had they done that, I think they end up winning that football game, and they're in the NFC title game against the Lions, a team that they matched up well against last year because of that secondary in Detroit. So for me, this is a team where the ceiling definitely is the Super Bowl. Now, 20-1.
Right.
Yeah, man, if that were like sitting in the 30-1 range, if we were at the Bears at 35-1 range, I would probably have a Packers ticket. But at 19-1, it's tough for me to get really excited because it feels like, if you kind of set up the bell curve of the possible results here, the swing to the high side is not as likely as that 19-1 price.
You mentioned a name that I think is pretty fascinating. So Josh Jacobs comes over. What do you think the workload is? Because I know that Aaron Jones missed some time last year, but workload-wise, in terms of rushing yards and whatnot, pretty even split for the running backs last year, almost identical when you're talking about the workload. And it's not like if Aaron Jones had played the whole season, he was going to push for a rushing title. If you're looking at Jacobs, he's 16-1 to lead the league in rushing. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but I don't know if he is he going to be this bell cow back that the market expects him to be?
No, I don't think he is.
I agree.
And I think that A.J. Dillon is going to still get 5 to 8 carries a game. I think Jacobs probably gets 15, but you're going to see A.J. Dillon consistently rotated into this offense. And the reason I don't like this is Aaron Jones was a different running back than A.J. Dillon. Josh Jacobs is kind of a poor man's A.J. or Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon is a poor man's Josh Jacobs. This is a 3 yards in a cloud of dust style running back. I love the fact that Aaron Jones could go out and break a run at any moment, and that if you spread out defenses, you force them to lighten the box, you have a home run hitter in your backfield. Now you don't really have that home run hitter. Maybe he picks up 5 yards, 7 yards in certain situations on first down when you spread teams out, and that puts you in a positive situation against the sticks. But I like the upside and also the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield more from Aaron Jones than what I like from Josh Jacobs here. I was surprised they moved on from him because I thought he was a key cog when healthy in that offense.
Look, from a fantasy perspective, what it gives it to you, Jones was very boom or bust, but the boom was there.
Yeah.
Right? So, you could get those massive performances from him, those big plays. Josh Jacobs, overtly physical, yards per carry after contact, very strong. But like you said, it eliminates a facet from your offense that I think in Green Bay has been there for a while and has been a big reason why. And I think it was a big reason why, too. It helped Jordan Love really grow last year, too. And now that's not going to be there for them. I'm very fascinated to see what that dynamic is like in that backfield. Because I think Jacobs is good, but I don't know if you're just riding him the way that most people expect that you're going to.